Hey, simplifiers. Have you ever wondered what's it like to think like a creative director, a marketing director, someone who comes alongside you and draws out the gold and shares it with the world? Well, today's episode is going to be with a great friend, Isaac Burrow. What are the things that we're thinking about? What are the frameworks? What are the structures? And then what can you be able to do to tell your story better? Of course, we're going to talk about AI, but not the way you might think. So stick around and enjoy this episode with Isaac Burrow. We're just going to jump right in. So, like your role now at Oak IQ as the marketing director, I mean, there's a lot of priorities. There's a lot of goals,
Sure.
and how you reach those goals is not always linear.
OKQ is a super awesome project. It's a vertically integrated private equity firm for real estate. So they're raising funds to do these super fun, really cool, real estate projects, all multifamily, some new builds, some value add. So one, it's super exciting for me because it's a whole new like industry for me to learn about. So I'm doing marketing. I'm good at marketing. I understand marketing. There's a lot of creative in it. I'm good at creative. I understand creative. I have my own flavor, which might not be for everybody, but I can do my job, right? But there's this whole other level that's like language and legal, which is kind of intense. I've never had a job that is so specific on language and legal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's pretty interesting. Uh, you've done a ton of work in that space specifically. You've
Yeah.
also done a lot of work in general in ads and like paid media buying and things like that. So like housing is one of the like five areas that
Yeah.
yeah, you can get an ad set, shut down. You can get an entire account like set turned off basically. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
I've been with you guys for just over 4 months, and I think I've had at least three of the six channels like shut down for 24, 48 hours because something tripped a flag. Like we didn't do anything
Mm-hmm.
wrong, no issue, but they're so intense about uh, just protecting that conversation around housing. So it's super interesting just being in that space and trying to make sure you're doing everything by the book and actually being effective with the content.
Right. So, like in those cases, you have to look at, okay, well, what are we actually, putting out as far as the content? Are we
Mhm.
doing lead ads versus honestly just even good branding ads? Like you look at, honestly, some of the biggest brands in the world don't have a call to action.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and it triggers as like a direct response marketer. You're like,
Right.
oh,
Right.
what do you mean? I need to track it. I need to have a, you know, the UTM,
Hmm.
link, and I need to be able to put that and see how, exactly where everything came from. And, sometimes, especially if it's not, your money that you're spending, it's your
Oh
boss's
yeah.
money. And a lot of times just people are not that linear. Right. And yet they see a Coke ad and there's no call to action. They see, some of these, Macy's ads we're seeing, and it doesn't say, click this QR code and go to this. Here's your local store. Like it's literally about what's the feeling, what's the emotional pull, and
Yeah.
how are we aligning with values? How are we aligning with, honestly, it's just good old branding.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you kind of have to move in those different circles. And you're like, I've got to do both, to the direct response side. But from on the beginning, sometimes it's just like getting content out, and it's the podcast content,
Yeah.
or it's a clip from this or that, and it's more about just sharing your values and sharing your perspective and your passion for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then it causes the intrigue. Oh, they didn't tell me to go sign up for a course or go download this thing. And actually, I want to be able to figure out what they're doing because they talked about some sort of pain, some sort of problem that I can
Right.
identify with. They hooked me. There's a story, and the offer is to go learn more about them. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes that is the way to even um, not have those flags, and
Yeah.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
have
Yeah.
those points against you when you're spending money with different platforms.
Yeah. No, it is because like with pretty much any job that I've ever had in the context of doing like media buying, because media buying is so scary for so many people, especially when I think the fear, there's always going to be a fear somewhere. I think the fear is in the small business owner or in the entrepreneur that's asking me to spend like $300 a month ad spend, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And then the fear is in me when they're like, yeah, I think we could probably do like a $20,000 a month spend, and I'm responsible for making sure that that 20K one gets spent, which is a scary statement, and then two, that it's effective and that I can clearly point to ROI and like, I've met whatever your KPIs, which means they have to understand their KPIs, which is a
Hmm.
whole other, that conversation. You said the linear,
Yeah.
like I know before when we were getting started here, we were talking about just the idea of making sure that in projects that whoever you're reporting to has a clear understanding of their goals, because a lot of
Mm.
times when you're a freelancer and you're executing a project, um, a lot of times like it's a little bit easier, for in my experience personally, it's a little bit easier because the person who's hiring me like has real clear, like they really know what they're spending their money on.
Mm.
And then a lot of times when you're working for an org, maybe it's a W-2, maybe it's even a volunteer thing, it's a little bit, there's a little bit more freedom. It feels like maybe there's a perspective of more freedom. It's like, oh yeah, let's just do this project or let's try that project. And a lot of times there's less clarity and everything's maybe a little bit more, we focus on whatever's urgent this week. And
Right.
it can get a little discombobulated as far as like having real clear goals that then the teams actually doing the work can create the processes and define the steps to get to said goal. A lot
Hmm.
of times, in my experience, you end up receiving a strategy or a process
Hmm.
without clear goals. And you also don't know this strategy and you also don't know this process.
And
And
the
there's usually
context.
yeah, there's a lot of assumption in there. Maybe like I had a gig one time and I was working for this guy and he's a super cool dude, but he it was like a retainer thing. So we would usually connect at the beginning of the month, set the goals, and very little connect throughout the month, and then we would just circle up at the end of the month and make sure everything got done. But he had been a graphic designer and he had been a marketing director at another firm and he had done a lot of other stuff and he had like education and courses and different products he was selling. And so every time we would get together, he would be like, "Yeah, I need you to like build a campaign using these kind of tools and just jump in and do this in HubSpot and do this in WordPress." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, I kind of know what you're talking about. We don't actually use that tool over here." And that was actually, HubSpot doesn't have that service anymore, but we have this other subscription that we use. And but what are we trying to accomplish exactly? What are we doing? Oh, it's a webinar. You're okay. You're telling me we're going to do a webinar for your course. Okay, cool. Now that we actually know what you want to do, let's talk about the tactics. And we would always run into that kind of thing where he was so excited because he had thought about, I think because he kind of enjoyed that work and he wasn't doing it anymore. So he was like really excited to tell me about like all the cool ways I was going to accomplish something. And I'm like, all right, dude, like back up. Like, what are we doing exactly?
Yeah.
And I just, at some level, I think you run into that a lot, like
Yeah.
just really trying to help make sure, one, that you know what you're trying to do, because that's important,
Mhm.
but that you're kind of the leadership above you. There's a book called Vertical Leadership, I think it's what's
Yes.
called. Yeah. So that principle of like when you're in that manager role or even director role, um, you have a job of managing yourself and leading and directing your team, but also appropriately and from your position, leading vertically and like helping those above you actually know what they're requesting, and really shape and form the clarity that a lot of times they think they have, but it doesn't actually execute, or it's not executable for the team that's actually supposed to take it and run it at the ground floor. So I think that's a lot of definitely like a powerful tool that I've utilized a lot over the years, to try to just keep in mind, how do I bring the people asking me to do something clarity in what they actually want.
Mhm. What are other frameworks that you like to use? I mean, there's plenty of whether it's on the leadership side, whether it's on the creative side, it helps to
Sure.
have like when you look at a painting and if the frame doesn't match, like it's kind of weird. And the kind of the same thing happens in business where it's like you really need the frame first for
Hmm.
then the creativity to be there. So it's like the reverse of that. Often as marketing directors, Isaac, you and I both know we're like, okay, what are we trying to go for? What are we aiming for? So what are some of those frameworks that you like to go ahead and set the frame and then let the creativity be that unique piece, be that differentiator?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things that I really like to think about, especially like, I've had like the most recent role I had before the project I'm in now, the role that I have as marketing director with OKQ, that role is, we're kind of in that process of stepping away from being a lean startup, to being an actual like company, to where there's an actual team doing work. So a lot of my job there, besides just the standard definition of marketing director, I'm also kind of really, I've got my hands in all the mess of full stack marketing, because it's really me. We have like a VA and then some contractors that do some creative work. So I'm not really doing any tactical creative work. I'm not editing videos or
Sure.
creating graphics or anything like that, but I'm in the middle of everything else. So from copywriting or whatever. And so again, like kind of my full-time job is really to make sure I understand the needs and the goals and the desires of my leadership, so that I can, one, reinforce what they're looking for and make sure that we're really clear on it. And then that I can like tactically execute. Pretty decent like contrast. I came from a nonprofit where, kind of at the height of my marketing director role there, I was leading two departments that encompassed about 45 people. So just way bigger scope of like trying to organize teams, trying to organize managers of those teams, trying to take the tasks and the high level needs, and still kind of doing that process of like, okay, this is what you're looking for, this is what you want. When you say that, I think this is what you think you're saying, but this is what I'm hearing. A lot of that like, um, proactive listening, like intentional listening, and like really making sure things are clear. And then really trying to establish project management, which is kind of like the bane of my existence. Like I'm not good at that stuff. I'm not a good administrative person at all. Um, so I lean into project management pretty hardcore. I kind of went through probably the cliff notes of Google's project management course, which is, their Google's free courses are a treasure trove for anybody.
It's true.
Um, but you only have to pay for the accreditation.
Mhm.
I think maybe now you have to pay like $40 or something, but it's such great education. So this nonprofit that I was at, we were able to, get the what do you call it? It's not a grant, but basically they waive the fee if you're a nonprofit, like if you're a accredited nonprofit or whatever. So I got on my project management team, trained in that. I went through it. And we're definitely not executing it 100%, but it did so much to create framework and process, and like this is how you do discovery, and you
Mm.
can't start creative until you finished discovery. And so just like even kind of creating, I think I look at project management like you're creating boundaries to be able to really like put that positive foot forward and say like, I really want to serve this project, I really want to do well, and I want to give you everything you're looking for, but if I can't understand what you're asking me to manage, there's no chance I'm going to be able to manage it.
Right.
So that would be a huge framework. Number one is like building some type of project management into everything that I do. And that falls down to, this is my, distillation of like way smarter people doing way better things than I could ever hope to do. But discovery is where you really try to put a hard cap on making sure that we've discovered the goals, the deliverables, the threats to whatever that project is, and then clear timelines and capacity or budget if it's a financial thing. And then really just trying to drive, like, we're going to have this done by next Wednesday. Discovery, that's like when we close the door, discovery no longer is an option, which means you can't say, oh, hey, by the way, there was actually another page we wanted on that website. Oh, hey, by the way, that wasn't one webinar, it was two webinars. So I really try to build that boundary around discovery, and that helps me get my job done, but it also hopefully creates like a real clear understanding that there's a time to ideate, which is
Mhm.
a challenge that I know a lot of visionaries have. Every new phrase or word is a open door to new ideas. So really, like, discovery as a process is to help me shut the door on ideation. And then creative is where we actually create the thing, whether it's copy or landing page or whatever those elements are. And then I kind of made this up. This is my distillation again. Like, I do like a review fork. And so that review fork is either an approval or a review to go back to discovery.
Right.
If it is an approval, then we actually execute, and then we do a final, quality assurance QA to like make sure that there's no errors or typos or spelling or whatever, and then we're done with the project. So that's kind of my super simple version of project management, and I try to install that whether it's a freelance job or whether it's my actual W-2 thing with this other company. That's how I try to approach everything that I do, just because it's so cut and dry. I can explain it in 3 minutes. Everybody can get on board with it, and it's a boundary, like, preserver for everybody to have their space. When it's time to do ideas, like, give it your all. When it's time to execute and create, let's do it with 100%. And when it's time to review and see if we're actually ready to execute or not, um, it's just super helpful in that space. And for me right now, one of my places I'm trying to work and kind of maybe shake off a few things and step into some other new things. Um, I'm really kind of having this conversation of compression, like to do more faster,
Mhm.
which is, for any creative or marketing director, any type of management or director role in this space, that's a scary word. Do more faster. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that realistically. Like, what does it really look like? Because I was in a mastermind session. We have this really cool mastermind that we're part of, but kind of blowing my mind because when I first jumped into it, like, they were kind of talking, which you hear a lot in the business world and the entrepreneurial world, around like mindsets and abundance mindset and scarcity mindset. And I think honestly, I had kind of like a perspective of like, this is just mumbo jumbo, like weird woo woo whatever.
Gotcha.
But I really like tried to approach these sessions with an open mind. And I think from my pragmatism, I sort of distilled it down to like, you can only get as far as you're willing to think. And if
Mhm.
you've got a block that says these are the only things that are possible, whether it's my resources or my capacity or my ability or my team, if you have a box that you're putting those things in, then that's as far as you can get. And so for me, like, I think kind of building that framework for myself to where it's a little bit less like, let's manifest like a future where we're successful in everything we do. Like, I can't really deal with that. But if we're talking about, hey, let's really like honestly evaluate what things I don't think you're capable of doing. If I can really be clear and honest with myself and we can have an open dialogue, then maybe it's not actually that you're not capable, it's that I'm not letting you get there. Or vice versa. If I really think I only have this capacity, but I don't really evaluate all the reasons why I'm limiting myself there, then I'm never going to be able to get past that benchmark because I really believe I can only do that much. And so a practical of that is like trying to iterate less, execute publicly more, and be able to have faster turnarounds on content and things like that. So that's, I think, trying to work that back into my framework of project management and how I execute projects and try to streamline and make that faster. Has been challenging, but it's been helpful.
I think though what you brilliantly pointed out about the review fork. Um, that kind of just checking, hey, I want to make sure that we're in the right direction, want to make sure that we're aligned. That concept and the idea of that, I think, is how you go further, farther, faster.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah, for sure.
because rather than waiting for a 1 year performance review, too
Or
late.
even like a 3 month project like deadline.
Right. I was actually dealing with this today when I was asked to do a task, and I said it's too late to do that. That's been done actually earlier in the process because the video
Yeah.
is already rendered and it's like scheduled for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like
Right. Yeah,
the
yeah. No, exactly.
it's like it's too late. But if there's multiple review forks, or the concept of giving quick feedback, from your leadership, hey, is this in the right direction? Great. It's as opposed to having, a 30-minute meeting, it's, a check-in, and it's 5 to 10 minutes, and okay, the next week I can be able to, communicate to my vendors and communicate to the team, here's how
For
we're going to
sure.
be able to do this. And so just that constant, feedback is what I, as both a creative and as, a manager and director, I crave that,
Yeah.
so that I can be able to, point everyone in the right direction, so that we don't have curveballs that, like, you're like, I I didn't know, and this changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, like little things like we've made an entire project around, say, like a webinar. We're executing the webinar. We had all the conversations. Nowhere in that conversation did we decide what platform we were having the webinar on. And the company actually has subscriptions to 3 different tools that could all host a webinar.
Oh, wow.
So like those types of things of like that's just, I mean, I made that up, but that's an example of like you can have so many important conversations, but if you're not having a clear like discovery phase where you're actually putting a pin in it, like, okay, here's my checklist of everything that has to be executed that we have to discover in the conversation. I mean, that like ending discovery is like its own little mini review fork before you hit creation. And if you execute, you do all the banners, and you write the copy, and you shoot the videos, and you create the landing pages, and you create the emails, and you do everything that goes into a webinar, but nobody thought about, is wait, are we doing this on Descript or Wistia or Zoom? Well, I don't know. Do we still have a Wistia account? That's what we did it on last time. Well, I don't know. Who has the credentials? I don't remember. That guy is working at the company anymore. I think it's connected to the like global email address. So it's just like all those kinds of things. Like it's so important to have frameworks, but it's important to like build your scopes of projects that tie into that project management process. And then the cool thing is like the review fork thing that I kind of made up. I'm sure I stole it from somebody, but I just try to insert that as many places as I possibly can.
Yeah.
So it's like, if it is a discovery to creative, then there's a review fork. If it's, review of the landing pages or whatever, there's a review fork there. And we're doing full stack to make sure that everything's executed so that day of or week of, we're not shocked with like, oh crap, nobody chose the platform.
So even today, I was realizing that a client used, an AI tool that took everything that we talked about and really, summarized it really well. It made it more concrete. There's just something powerful of just being able to see things written out. I mean, whether it's
Yeah,
from a meeting that you thought, oh, I just kind of thought we were just talking about different things, versus like, I mean, I've had that, I've experienced that
yeah,
myself too. But then when it's like, no, this is what we decided, these are the action items, this is how we're moving forward, here's the next meeting. Like even tools like being able to add into your Google Meet or your Zoom, whatever you're using
yeah,
for video conferencing, having that is a super cool, advantage, because then it,
yeah,
it solidifies it.
Yeah.
and you're able to very easily, you know, go back and go, okay, here's the recap. Here's what we talked about. But more than just that, more than just the meetings, it's here's the next process, and here's where we are in the process, and just even those reminders, like you're saying, and these like little, you know, review fork check-ins and syncs, like really, really matter, because it it creates this is how the tracks are laid out, and
Yeah.
you put the train on the track,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we're going to
Yeah.
go in this direction. This is how we're going to do it. What are other ways that you're using tech, you're using AI, even just experiments that you're using
Yeah.
that really help get everyone on the track and
Yeah.
moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I feel like the whole AI revolution or whatever, like it's definitely in the beta. So I feel like I feel like there's like a new tool like every 15 minutes, and which is kind of cool in some ways, because at first it was like, oh, there's this thing called ChatGPT, and then now there's like five major ones, and then and everybody's building little apps that do all the things. So
Right.
I'm kind of like in my copious amounts of free time trying to learn make.com.
Hmm.
Make's super interesting. I haven't actually done anything effective or legitimate with it yet.
It's like a visual no code version of
Mhm.
Zapier.
I watched a keynote recently, and you'd have to Google it because I can't remember exactly, but I think he was the director or the CEO of GitHub. And he basically made the statement that uh, coding jobs will no longer exist in 3 to 5 years.
Mm.
And this is the dude of like if any dude is trying to like say, hey, our jobs are secure, like you would think it would be this guy. But the takeaway that I had, even though I'm not a coder, I learned some CSS and whatever, but in a little bit of HTML back when it was like HTML2. Not a coder. But what I took away from kind of his very astute perspective on these things, and this is a guy that his entire world and living is coding, right? He's saying the thing that's going to be important in the future is to fully understand a job or a task or a language in his particular context, and that's going to help you communicate and regulate the AI to do its job faster than you could. And that's really the goal. So when you think about it that way, you know, they're not here for our jobs or whatever. It's not that there's not going to be people that are managing the building of apps in the future. It's not that there aren't going to be copywriters in the future or marketing directors or graphic designers or some of the new stuff that's been coming out with Runway. There's not going to be, I mean, there's still going to be animators and people that are shooting video and all that kind of stuff. But I think, and this is probably my biased opinion because in my heart, I just want to be a creative. But I think that's the world we're going to be in, because the
Mm.
thing I personally don't think AI is ever going to fully truly figure out is how to tell or engage a true emotional story. Like I think they're gonna. I mean, obviously there's frameworks for story, which again, my love for frameworks. Donald Miller, love that dude, and just kind of his
Oh yeah.
whole story brand framework. Russell Brunson, so many great frameworks. Even I forgot the dude's name, but you could Google this too. There's a few videos on it, but he was an early story writer that got hired on Disney, and he basically reworked the hero's journey story framework, added a few little bells and whistles, and it became the Disney story framework. And that fed into the framework that just a little tweak became the Pixar framework. And so that framework of stories, it's literally like a little accordion. You set it up and you have almost down to the minute every chapter of a quality story, and each turn and disappointment and failure and rescue and whatever. And then the same, you mentioned checking out Belmont, like music, good music has a framework. Good lyrics have a framework.
Mm.
And so I think a great musician or filmmaker or copywriter, they know how to look at the frameworks, they know how to lean on the frameworks, they know how to use those frameworks to make things go faster so that then they have more bandwidth and more creative space and more capacity to really do the polish and the thing that makes it great. You know, I saw a funny TikTok and this dude laid out the plot of the Avengers Black Panther movie
Yeah.
and the Barbie movie, and they're the same exact framework. You have a normal world where there's a very isolated community that has a great situation going, but someone's not satisfied with it. So they find a way to get outside of their normal world where now they're experiencing something new, but they bring back someone who's trying to take over and reclaim that world, and then they have to figure out how to reconcile their values for the betterment of both worlds. It's literally a framework. It's the same exact framework.
Wow.
And there's probably 15 other stories that use that same framework. And you could probably take that framework and make your next set of reels. You could probably run with a podcast. You could write a book, and you could take that framework and find three different ways. Like, how do you take the C suite executives and the executors and managers and directors and actually like get them to work together by bringing their worlds together? Like, you could literally do that, right? And that's the beauty of a framework. It's like you can knock out the skeleton and the structure and some of the really important like anchor points of anything, whether it's a song or a creative or a marketing campaign or whatever. And then you can polish and really refine and add your brand and add your personality and make it something great that stands alone. But it all kind of starts at that framework.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually interviewed a friend, Luke, that I mentioned earlier in our pre-conversation, who also
Yeah.
brought up StoryBrand, also brought up Pixar, and I mean, it's actually like a really helpful thing to realize. There's some ways that we can be able to filter and to be able to maybe take this hour-long presentation. Okay, we need to bring it down to this. So we're going to talk about
Yeah.
these several things. You know, one thing that I love, you mentioned Russell Brunson, and you know, you've got the perfect webinar framework. You've got hook story offer. You've got the
Yeah.
um, you know, story strategy and social proof or data. You know, like it's really designed to go, okay, how can people process? Oh, they process with story,
Yeah.
you know, and then you can be able to share your findings and share how you got there and actually get people on a journey. And that's where you're saying earlier, like AI is really, you know, not going to know those emotional nuances. And
Yeah.
those of us who know how to leverage it can be able to take those frameworks or take the best ofs, you know, to be able to give some sort of context. But ultimately, it is up to us as leaders and as creatives and as presenters to be able to really share, you know, okay, well, what's a way that I need to make this into, you know, even TED Talk, they've got specific elements and they've got, you know, these different aspects all related to story and all
Yeah.
related to this is how you can be able to, you know, have the most impactful presentation. And you're not going to put your hour long all the data, you know, in a very like, okay, let's bring all of that and shove it into this. Like you're gonna be piecing things out, and you're gonna be creating enough intrigue and enough curiosity, and really, you know, like as you mentioned, story brand, being able to realize that you're not the hero,
Yeah.
and you
That's a
know,
huge epiphany. Oh my
it
gosh. Yeah.
it's the biggest.
Yeah. I've never actually gone and done the whole story brand certification, but the number of like freelance clients and then even like in like W2 roles that I've had and things, the number of times that I've tried to wrestle people that they're not the hero, that the client is the hero, it's like so hard for some people to like comprehend that. It's like, no, wait, this is my product and my product is going to like save their life or whatever. Like it's going to be the best soda they've ever drank. Like, and somehow that's the thing. But reverse engineering, like, and you know, think about Coca-Cola. Uh, because this touches on your point like 45 minutes ago about like branding, how important branding is. Big massive brands, especially when you get into the space of like global brands and luxury brands and things like that, they don't sell products, they sell feelings, or they sell like a state of being. And one of the things, like if you go do a little deep dive on Coca-Cola, um, they were one of the first brands that really stepped out in trying to be almost like take advantage of like political points. Like one of my favorite Coca-Cola ads is like from the mid 60s, and it's like I think it's a downtown New York uh, shoot, and it's a group of black and white kids, sweaty. They just finished playing a game of basketball or whatever, and they're cracking these like ice cold, perspiring cokes of bottles of Coke, and the shot is just this gorgeously framed, beautiful photo. And there's a little, 14-year-old black boy and maybe a 15-year-old white boy sitting on this park bench, and their knees are like barely touching as they're drinking a Coca-Cola, and everybody's just got these massive smiles on their face. Like we don't even get how that matters. Like maybe if you're in an area of the country where there is like a racial polarization or
Sure.
whatever, you
Yeah.
might feel some of that. But like that is like nationally groundbreaking in whatever 1967.
Yeah,
Like
it was a great it was the common, equalizer, and
yeah,
it tugged on emotion.
yeah. And in that moment, they're equating like equality and community and unity and peace and brotherhood to a bottle of soda. Like what the heck, But it starts to create that vibe and that synergy, and like every community has felt that. Like, I've got to have this drink, or I've got to have these shoes, or I've got to have this thing, not because they're actually decent products at all, but because that's part of what I've subtly somehow in our communities and our little circles and our friendship groups, we've bought into. That's what fun looks like. That's what community looks like. That's,
Mm.
you know, part of it, right? And I think that idea of branding to do it right, and like I'm a believer. We're both believers. We love the Lord. I think one of the biggest things that I've juggled doing marketing is how do I do it genuinely and authentically,
Yeah,
and not use these tools
yeah,
to manipulate,
yep.
because you absolutely can manipulate, like because that's kind of the core of telling a really good story
Oh, yeah.
is like to
I
manipulate emotion.
literally yesterday, I was in a client meeting, and I said, genuinely, like, "I don't like hype, like, I don't like lying. Tell
Yeah,
me, is there real scarcity? And, like, are you closing the door on this because you need these funds for this purpose?" Or,
yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the
yeah.
context was. It was more about, like, we're not going to be lying here. Like, we really have a business plan that we're following. And so this is why we only have these
Right.
amount of spots. We only have it until this time, because having like that manipulative aspect is just, oh, it's like the furthest. I don't want to be a part of that at all.
Yeah, 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 totally. Yeah, and I think it's beautiful and really exciting when, you know, in a freelance position, I get to choose clients that I really believe in, and in a W-2 position, I get to jump into a company where I know that those values are really upheld. Maybe not everybody's a Christian, not maybe not everybody is a Christ follower, but there's a sense of like we're not trying to pull one over on people. Like we really do have a genuine belief in this product, and we really do believe that for the right people, it's going to be a great move. Like I love being able to be involved with those types of products because it's just so enjoyable to create the content. It's so enjoyable to make the connections and to see honestly like the social proof, like that's super important in your marketing. But like it's great to see someone say, man, like I had this issue and this product solved it, and like I couldn't be happier. That
Right.
like that's just so exciting to me. And I think one of the fun things, just to bring it back to the actual question, we discussed frameworks, and I think the power of understanding frameworks, the power of doing actual work, especially in the AI revolution, because you've probably seen this, you can plug a question into AI like, hey, write me a marketing email, and it's going to be like unlock the future with whatever. Like unlock, I feel like is in every piece of AI marketing.
I'm always having to like, I'm like, hey, delve. We don't do that. We don't use that word. I don't know if you
Yeah,
know
there's
it.
like
Or
there's
like
these
you can
random
recognize
terms.
the thing from other people. You're like,
Yeah,
that phrase, I've seen that way too often. Or
yeah, yeah. So we talked about the company I'm working for right now. We're working with investors, so it's always trying to sneak in savvy investors. Do whatever savvy investors do this. Savvy investor, and so like I actually told the AI like stop using the word savvy. Like don't do that. But yeah, I mean, I think if you have a good understanding of frameworks and how tools can work,
Mhm.
the different AI tools that are out now and that are coming out, like they can get 80% of the work done in
Yeah.
minutes. And then you have that space to refine and polish and put more effort into the stuff that only you as a person could do, you know?
There's this rule called the 10-80-10 rule.
Mhm.
And are you familiar with it? Yeah, and
Yeah.
so if you're not familiar with it, it's just like a really easy way to say, hey, for the first 10%, you're going to cast the vision, you're going to give the context, you're going to give, the parameters, the framework, you're going to give, the goal, right? And then the 80% is for the person that you're delegating to. In this case, we're delegating to AI.
Yeah.
And so it's for that person, or in this case AI, to be able to get it to that 90%, get it in the red zone, for football players. But it's for the last 10% to be taken back, as the owner of this project, to like
Yeah.
take it to the end zone.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what you're saying, right, Isaac?
Yeah. Really. I mean, because it's the idea of like, I mean, you hear all the adages like work smarter, not harder type things. There's a place for hard work, and I think sometimes there's a perspective of like work smarter, not harder means like I'm going to do the 4-hour work week, that whole dude's thing,
Yeah, Tim
which is
Ferriss.
cool. Like yeah, Tim Ferriss. Yeah, like I've never been able to pull that off personally, but I think there's space in like using tools and leveraging things like AI, or even like our company's utilizing a VA, which has been really interesting.
Yeah.
It's been really helpful. But you have that process of like I have to still create a scope of project. I have to create my processes that I understand and that I can like spot the deficiencies in or whatever, and then I
Mhm.
have to train my VA to do it the way I want it done so that I can actually see the process, and see the outcome or whatever.
May not have English as a first language, and you're like,
Yeah,
okay, that's where that last 10%, where I'm able to craft this and say,
totally.
change this word to this.
Yeah, 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 yeah. When you're getting with when you're working with VAs and international, like I know there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of people. I've talked to people who are really into it, and I've talked to people who are like think that it's bad. It's like taking jobs away from America and that kind of thing. I think, aside from the political conversations and whatever, I think one of the most interesting, I won't say it's good or bad, one of the most interesting things to me is the cultural difference that
Mm,
shows in like taste and opinion. So like with graphic design, for example, or copy, it's not that it's wrong, it's that there's a whole cultural lens that these colors are great. And I'm like, oh my gosh, why in the world did we choose these colors? And it's like they're just like recognizing those things and working those out in the relationship that we're building with
yeah,
our virtual team.
yeah.
That's super interesting to me, and it's been fun, honestly fun to like work with different cultures and find congruent ways to actually execute good work. I've really enjoyed that. Along the same lines of like engaging and utilizing VAs, engaging and like understanding how to work frameworks, and then understanding, I think, the limitations of AI tools. I've been experimenting a lot with a few tools. Kind of my favorite one that I use most consistently, I would say over the last like 6 months, has been Perplexity. If you've
Mhm.
checked that one out at all,
Yeah.
I really like Perplexity. One, it pulls from all the major LLMs, so it's got the nuances of those built in, but the ability to like set a focus is massive for me. And the fact that it's like fully integrated in the internet, so you can do like real time searches and research and stuff. I really, really like Perplexity. Here and there, I've liked Claude more. I feel like I've changed my mind in the last like 3 weeks. I don't know what they've been doing, but I liked Claude more for copywriting for a while. I felt like it executed voice better. But the kind of a crazy thing that I've been playing with in the space of copywriting, um, Google put out one called Notebook LM, which
Yep.
is really interesting because kind of the use case, what they're telling you to use it for, I honestly creeped me out. So it's basically you have these little notebooks and you can dump content into the notebooks. Like here's copy and paste from text that I wrote or copied from a book. Here's a couple of articles. Here's some YouTube videos. And then you can chat that data set, which is interesting.
Mhm.
But kind of the main use case that they have for it is that it'll generate a unique podcast, like a duo podcast,
Right.
which is so weird to me because it's like you dump all the content in and it's like, oh yeah, we're going to be taking a deep dive today, and it's like it feels like I'm listening to like an NPR podcast about you know how to fix my Honda Accord like evap leak or something.
I think that's actually the framework they used was, "Okay, make it
No,
sound like
it's
NPR, and we're gonna say deep dive every time."
deep dive. Oh, we're going to deep dive into the deep dive so that we can get down to the deep dive. Yeah, no, it's pretty silly. But so I've been trying to figure out how to use it because that was the first tool that I found that you can just within a browser really easily drag and drop content and then like query that content exclusively. There's other tools out there that do it now, but what I kind of did was I would give it specific commands to override that default to create a podcast. And so I just built some real generic prompts basically saying that I'm building like an email series following Russell Brunson's one of his email strategies, or I'm building a podcast based on the perfect webinar or whatever. So I'll
Mhm.
give it a very specific framework that I understand and that I'm familiar with and I could execute on my own. But then I kind of like ask it to, like here's maybe the transcript of 6 podcasts that my client shot, and I want you to stay true to that voice and use verbatim quotes as much as possible and not add extraneous like language or whatever. Um, and it executes pretty well. The framework that I'm for one of the podcasts that I'm helping produce right now, the framework is essentially like just super simple, like topic introduction, candid social proof kind of conversation points, and then real clear 5 point lesson, like micro lesson, and then a recap, tie into a book, and then sign off. So it's real simple, kind of standard YouTube like informational podcast structure. But I have it write a script intro,
Mhm.
and then I have it give basically prompts based on the voice, and then I take that outline that it essentially spits out, and then I work through it with my client and make sure that the full written script intro is true to their voice, and then have them answer all the prompts so that they can kind of talk off the cuff, but they have something in the teleprompter to make sure that if they forget what was the next point or whatever, they can just kind of be in it. So
Right.
that's been a really helpful structure, and I can knock out a podcast outline in just a few minutes. So kind of my scope of project right now is I will go to Perplexity and have it research questions through social. So I'll have the focus be social exclusively, have it research questions, dialogue, vernacular, whatever. I'll pull that, and then I'll have it focus on the web and pull articles with stats and statistics. I'll take all that data, drop it into Notebook LLM to have it actually pull from that data. Then I'll drop in some podcast transcripts from my client that is their true voice within the vein of that conversation, and then have it spit out my framework, filled out the whole outline for the podcast. And so I mean that maybe 20 minutes, and I've got like a whole podcast written, and
Boom.
that's like, yeah, way easier. Whereas like doing that entire process, I'm going to spend an hour to an hour and a half researching articles, reading all the articles, you know,
Banging
even
your
if you
head
are
against
dropping
the
those
wall.
articles into a summary. Yeah, like yeah. So it's like I think that's probably the most fine-tuned AI driven scope of project that I have right now. But my goal is to have like all my standard stuff, kind of ironed out. Um, I've kind of adapted like the Gary V content stack. So I've kind of got my own adaptation of that I'm working with my VA to train him through a process where we're taking the podcasts once they're done, the actual podcast episodes, taking those transcriptions and then dropping them through and prompting all of our content stack for a full week. And so I've kind of got this round robin process where researching, getting feedback from ideal clients. So I'm working with them to actually interview ideal clients, pulling that into research. And so I'm trying to create ideally a machine that I can step away from at some point and have hopefully run mostly autonomously with the AI and the VA. And I'm mostly just stepping in at those review forks to make sure that everything is on trajectory. I'm not noticing anything weird in language or voice or content or calls to action or things like that. I saw one the other day that slipped through the cracks, and it was like there was a CTA on a carousel that was like, if you want us to audit your books, and it was like, and this is not a company that would audit anyone's books. It's like drop us a DM and we'll give you a free audit of all your financials. I was like, no, 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 no. How'd that slip in there?
That's hilarious. Well, Isaac, man, we could go on for hours. Honestly, I didn't know that we'd go this long, but we'll have to, chat more and have
Yeah,
more episode in the future. We want to learn and we want to grow and find out what are the frameworks that are working. What are how can we model success, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I appreciate you coming on, Isaac.
yeah. Thanks, man. It was a pleasure. Good talking to you.
I hope you know by now that marketing directors and creative directors are really designed to help you succeed. You may be listening and not able to see the same books from the authors that we were just talking about. I mean, we've got Story Brand 2.0 from Donald Miller. We've got Russell Brunson's Expert Secrets and Traffic Secrets, and Alex Hormozy we could have gone into, and what else do we have up there? 80-20 for sales and marketing by Pierre Marshall. My point is, what are the aspects that you can be able to take away from this? You can take any of these books off the shelf, open them up, find the frameworks and implement them. I encourage you to do so. But also, if you need some help and you need to figure out which framework even to use, let me know. I'd love to help. Just use the link in the description and I'll talk to you then. Until next time, keep it simple, Saints.